Welcome to Introduction to District Planning. This lesson introduces installation planners to a new approach to comprehensive planning aimed at integrating key planning requirements that are commonly missing today. This is a working model that will mature and improve as it is implemented in test projects and standardized in playbooks and other guidance. Our goal is to develop an effective and efficient planning process that will be consistently followed at all installations by Air Force planners and their contracted support teams. Here are today's lesson objectives for the course. 1. Understand the differences between master planning and asset management and how they are integrated into the district planning process. And 2. Know the basic tasks and products of the district plan. Again, this is an introductory level lesson focused on the major concepts of a district plan. To start, we present the basic concepts that form the foundation and rationale for the district plan approach. The bulk of this lesson covers the district planning process, where we go over the main tasks and products needed to complete a district plan. And finally, we conclude the lesson with some basic advice on planning, prioritizing, and executing your future planning requirements. We hope planners will quickly see the benefits of this new planning approach. Remember, our goal is to make installation planning effective and efficient. Ultimately, it will be the installation's responsibility to execute. So AFCEC welcomes your input as we build this process together. A common criticism of installation planning products is that they are doorstops. They require significant effort to produce, but after that, they are delivered and they are never seen or used again. At the same time, the biggest criticism of project approval packages when reviewed by AFCEC, staff, or Congress is that they have not adequately been evaluated for alternatives, or that the project was not completely scoped. These problems are related and their solution requires an improved, coordinated planning effort that combines installation planning and asset management. Installation planning is not a theory invented by AFCEC. It is a national policy established by the National Defense Authorization Act and multiple executive orders. DoD Instruction Number 4165.70, Real Property Management, reflects these requirements, and AFI 32-7062, Comprehensive Planning, establishes roles and responsibilities to implement the Air Force's comprehensive planning process. While AFI 32-7062 makes the base community planner responsible for managing all aspects of the comprehensive planning process, understanding and applying fundamental installation planning concepts are solely the planner's responsibility. In this lesson, we use the term installation planning, quote unquote, to focus on and emphasize sustainable planning concepts, which are the foundations of the comprehensive planning and the heart of the base community planner's profession. Slide 4 outlines 9 strategies for sustainable planning from AFI 32-7062. We will discuss these more as part of the district planning process, but for now, we just want to emphasize the importance of these concepts in the comprehensive planning process. When we were talking about the big rocks of installation planning, implementing planning strategies are the first place to start, and that is where we will start the district planning process. If you are a base community planner, then you should already be familiar with these concepts. Ask yourself, how does your installation incorporate these concepts in their development strategies? Do you analyze your installation with respect to these concepts? Do you identify solutions where these strategies will be applicable? How do you incorporate these appropriate strategies into your development plans? Planning strategies are important, but they don't implement themselves. They must be incorporated into the installation's planning, programming, and execution of MILCON and FSRM projects. Therefore, we need to coordinate our good planning practices with the processes that we use to plan our investments. Like installation planning, asset management is also a national policy originating in Executive Order 13327. Numerous DoD directives and Air Force policy directives and instructions establish requirements for managing Air Force real property. Asset management requires processes to accurately account for, maintain, and manage real property in the most efficient and economical manner. while ensuring that the Air Force has the real property it needs for sustaining its mission. This process requires input from many functions across the installation. CE real property officers are primarily responsible for maintaining and managing the real property inventory. CE operations are primarily responsible for planning and executing maintenance. CE programs are responsible for planning and programming the FSRM and MILCOM projects. And CE environmental is responsible for verifying project compliance, while our CE planning is responsible for aligning projects with the installation development plan. The district plan approach presented in this lesson integrates installation planning and asset management for effective and efficient planning efforts. Planning districts for your installation were developed during the IDP process and are identified in the framework plan. The reason for dividing the installation up into planning districts is simply to assist the installation planner and make the installation planning process more efficient. As they establish districts, planners look for geographic areas with similar mission or support functions, features, land use patterns, building types, and/or transportation networks, which should help limit the scope and complexity of planning with respect to the district. When you start analyzing the district in the district plan, you may find that the district boundary should be adjusted. They're certainly allowable, but make sure that you understand why the framework plan originally created had the boundary before you implement your modification. What criteria is important in establishing a district plan, you might ask yourself. How big should a district be and how many districts should be established? The answer is whatever works best for your efficient planning. For example, having too many small districts is generally considered inefficient because they require multiple separate projects to execute, and they limit the facility inventory and land that can be evaluated when developing alternatives. On the other hand, a planning district that is too large will have to analyze problems and solutions that are either too numerous to analyze efficiently or unrelated by geography, function, or priority. Ultimately, all a planner can do is consider the problem thoroughly, follow established guidelines, and use their best professional judgment. A district plan bridges the gap between installation-wide planning and site plans. By planning at the district level, planners can focus effort on areas that need planning, attention to the mission, requirement, or command priority changes. When you read the UFC 2-100-01, you will see the term, quote-unquote, Area Development Plan. To be clear, the term ADP used in the UFCs is synonymous with the Air Force's use of the term District Plan. However, the Air Force chooses to use the term District Plan because it is more accurate in describing the plan's scope and because it allows the term Area Development Plan to be used generically as any plan that is limited in scope between the installation-wide IDP and the project-specific site plan. In reality, planners tend to use the two terms interchangeably. Planning within a district must connect back to the installation as a whole. The IDP contains a vision plan developed by senior installation leadership, identifying ideal development principles for maximizing the installation's long-term capabilities in terms of a vision statement, planning goals, and planning objectives. Understanding how the vision plan relates to development in the planning of the district is fundamental to the district plan and how the ADP maintains compliance with the IDP. While significant planning is completed at the ADP level, infrastructure networks that span the ADP district boundaries must be analyzed at the system level or installation level. These include utility systems, transportation networks, and parks and open space networks. The district plan process will likely require input from and provide input to these larger systems. This iterative process will require coordination between and should be recognized as a continuous iterative process. This slide introduces the major phases of the district plan process that will be discussed throughout the rest of this lesson. It also illustrates relationships to the IDP as well as other Air Force corporate processes that inform or are informed by district plans. As previously discussed, district plans are prepared for multiple planning districts, all of which are consistent with and become part of the installation's IDP. This is illustrated by the large green box labeled Installation Development Plan and multiple white boxes labeled District Plan. The model introduces you to 3 phases within the district plan process: district analysis, alternatives analysis, and plan documentation. We will discuss each phase in detail over the next 17 slides. But first, let's turn our attention to the boxes surrounding the district plan. These represent the inputs and outputs of the planning process. Let's start with the upper left yellow box labeled Strategic Basing. Established by AFI 10503, the strategic basing process should inform the installation planner of any significant increase or decrease in facility requirements associated with changing mission, manpower, or weapon system for the installation. The green box located above strategic basing represents the NEPA process, which is a formal process used to analyze and document the Secretary of the Air Force's decision for basing actions. Also note that the model shows an output from the district plan process. Labeled Capacity Analysis, the district plan process will follow facility capacity estimates for the planning district. New basing actions are less common than the continuous process of asset management applied across the installation. The various tan boxes represent opportunities for input from AFI MSC, activity managers, MAGCOMs, or other higher headquarters to provide strategic input into the district plan, such as high-value mission requirements, important investment strategies, or other priorities that agencies support. FCEC is working with AFI MSC and others to build business rule that can support this strategic investment guidance concept. The other tan boxes show opportunities for higher headquarters to provide vector checks during these planning process, which will help ensure that the proposed planning actions are properly analyzed and scoped. The final tan box at the lower right shows FCEC's intent to develop work processes that lead from the approved district plan to the PPBE process. The 2 remaining boxes in blue and green on the right represent coordination with the environmental and financial management programs during the analysis of alternatives. Both are clearly associated with installation planning, but typically are not adequately addressed by most bases. By coordinating basic practices and formats in our analysis of alternatives and then properly documenting our work, the district plan efficiently support the NEPA and FM's analysis as intended in the comprehensive planning program. We now look into the district plan process. The first phase of the district plan process is termed district analysis. District analysis applies installation planning practices and asset management principles and practices to develop a comprehensive planning approach that AFI 327062 requires but never actually described. Aspects of installation planning are grouped together and termed planning analysis, and asset management activities in this process are termed program analysis. But they can and should be worked concurrently during a district plan project. Phase 1 information collection effort should support both functions, and each is expected to inform the other with accurate analysis as applicable. Both also need to be complete before moving on to phase 2, analysis for alternatives. Earlier, we described installation planning as the heart of the base community planner profession. The proposed planning analysis process provides a thorough and systematic process to identify installation planning inputs to the district plan. Output from our planning analysis controls and influences development in the district plan, now and into the future, in accordance with the installation's vision and applicable best planning practices. It established a framework for short, mid, and long-term development within the district. The planning process is broken into 4 activities: plan strategies, development constraints, developable areas, and regulating plan. In the planning strategies process, the planner evaluates planning concept and associated best practices to determine how or if each is applicable to the district. Planners and installation leaders need to develop that these strategies are not an academic exercise. They are the means to achieve installation-wide objectives that originate in law, executive orders, or DoD policy. Planners should already be familiar with the strategies from UFC 2-100-01. AFCEC's goal is to clarify and expand the guidance from the UFC in planning playbooks. Here are 4 planning strategies that AFCEC will emphasize. The first one, sustainable planning. This leads to lasting development, meeting present mission requirements without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. The UFC identifies 16 separate strategies for sustainable planning to make the most effective use of limited resources, reduce fossil fuel use, and increase the use of alternative fuels, and to create more compact and sustainable communities that will still meet security and safety requirements. Second one, natural, historic, and cultural resource management. This considers natural, historic, and cultural resources in the planning process. Natural resources include threatened and endangered species, wetlands, habitat areas, forests, undisturbed land, and important view sheds. Historic and cultural resources may include historic buildings, district landscapes, and archaeological sites, as well as sacred sites to Native American tribes. District analysis requires coordination with CE environmental subject matter experts. The third one, healthy community planning. Incorporate health considerations and opportunities for physical activity in the planning process. Physical fitness is key to readiness. Regular physical activity is critically important for the health and well-being of people of all ages and reduces the negative impact from many chronic diseases. Strategies for healthy communities promote high connectivity, mixed land uses, and well-designed pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, decrease auto dependence, and increase levels of walking, running, and cycling. Healthy communities not only provide for physical activity through walking and biking, but also provide opportunities to grow healthier food choices. As such, where appropriate, master plans shall incorporate locations for community gardens and local food production. District analysis requires coordination with representatives of the installation's medical staff. And the fourth one, defense planning. Effective planning contributes to defendable and secure installations. Through the implementation of defensible planning strategies, planners contribute to the protection of life and property and sustain an installation's diverse mission set. Development constraints. This process is far from the new installation planners. Chapter 6 of the IDP analyzed potential constraints with respect to their potential to limit the installation's operational or development capacity. There will be subtle differences on how AFCEC chooses to identify and document constraints in the district plan process, and you should look to AFCEC playbooks and for further guidance in the future. But in general, identifying development constraints for a district will seem essentially be a mapping process, where the planner needs to work with data stakeholders to validate relevant GIS data and accurately identify why, where, how, and for how long the constraint will affect development. The list of all potential constraints is a long one. For consistency and clarity, the district plan will group the universe of constraints into 4 groups: operational, natural, and cultural, and built infrastructure. In very broad terms, these groups can be distinguished by not only the nature of the constraint, but also by associated functional authority or data steward. Operational constraints are most often based on safety restrictions associated with military operations. Good examples are airfield design criteria in the vicinity of a runway or aircraft ground movement areas, aircraft noise zones modeled from routine aircraft operations, quantity district arcs surrounding potential explosive sites, or range service impact zones associated with firing ranges. The functional authority will be the mission owner who manages these operations. Note to reviewers, we should remember to add real property out grants to our constraints analysis, such as utility drainage easements, privatization agreements, grazing/agricultural, or these are just brainstorming a few. Some natural constraints exist to protect environmental resources or to avoid natural environmental hazards. Good examples are no habit areas of threatened or endangered species, wetlands and water bodies, areas of steep topography, poor soil conditions, or flood zones not suitable for development, and environmental restoration site with regulatory land use restrictions. The functional authority for environmental will be in the CE environmental flight and or CE engineering flight. Cultural constraints exist to protect cultural resources and historic sites. Good examples are historic properties, both built structures and landscapes, eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, archaeological sites, culturally significant tribal sites or landscapes. The functional authority for cultural sites will also be in the CE environmental flight. Build constraints are existing installation infrastructure that have a current mission or installation support function. Build constraints are buildings, structures, roads, and streets, parking areas, sidewalks, utilities, and other constructed elements. Only mapping constraints is not sufficient for installation planning. Each type of constraint has its own influence on development. Here are 3 examples to illustrate this point. First one, QD arcs are often thought of as being an absolute restriction for development. However, related mission functions such as additional munition storage, maintenance, and handling facilities can and likely should be located within the existing QDs. Second one, aircraft noise zones above 65 decibels DNL begins to limit development. However, different facilities and uses are more or less sensitive to noise, and our analysis should be identified acceptable use for these restricted areas. And the third one, development in flood zones should be avoided. However, even flood zones can be incorporated into low-intensity development such as parks, ranges, or open storage, provided the flood risk is addressed in siting and design. AFCAC has developed a program using GIS to analyze constraints versus acceptable uses. The Asset Use Opportunities _A feature class, which is a part of the current SDS FIE 3.1 GIS geodatabase. This tool will continue to be refined to asset planners in constraint analysis. While the constraints we just discussed may seem permanent, it's important to point out that some may be overcome, whether by time or by mitigation. Operations may change over time and may reduce or increase the constraint. Environmental impacts may be mitigated by establishing conservation areas. Poor soils can be mitigated with additional foundation design at an additional cost. Third, historic properties may be modified with consultation and approval by the SHPO. Fourth, build constraints can be removed over time if needed when they no longer have a valid mission requirement and are no longer cost-effective to maintain. Fifth, transportation networks may need to be realigned or approved to support new future development. And while we may not be able to predict all future constraints with complete certainty, we should be able to make predictive assumptions about them and illustrate those features conditions in a series of maps. A short-term analysis identifies constraint conditions that will impact planning over the next 7 years. The 7-year period corresponds to the PPBE process, and its significance will be discussed in later topics relating to alternative analysis and program execution. A long-term analysis anticipates constraints that are likely to exist and highlight constraints that no longer exist in the long term, more than the 7 years out. This analysis is intended to support long-range visioning. We cannot achieve a long-range vision without actively planning for it. Naturally, a long-term process may have a high degree of uncertainty, but if it's still built on documented assumptions and clear development strategies, then it can help planners and leadership what is possible and provide a basis for the future. The IDP process asks installation commanders for their vision for future development. It is a planner's responsibility to provide the commander with a thorough and systematic analysis of future constraints to inform the visioning process. The regulating plan establishes development guidelines and restrictions within the district. Its origin stems from the municipal form-based code that regulates development using physical form such as build-to lines, required entry and or parking lot locations, minimum and maximum building heights, and acceptable uses, rather than separating specific land as the Air Force has in the past with land use maps. The district is divided into development parcels with roads and pedestrian networks forming the edge of the parcels. Appropriate development guidelines, termed attributes, are assigned to each parcel. Typical attributes will include permitted functions, street envelope standards, open space, public space, and lastly, building form and scale. AVCAC will provide more details on identifying and assigning parcel attributes in workbooks and future AVCAC courses. So now we covered how installation planning is incorporated into the district analysis process, and there was a lot to cover. Remember when I said that the planning analysis process is heart of the installation planner's mission and the art of their profession. I hope that statement is clear now and you see how your role as an installation planner shapes the district plan process. No matter what new mission pops up or which facility project installation leadership chooses to execute. Next, we will discuss how asset management is incorporated into the district analysis process. We term this process program analysis because it identifies and prioritizes requirements for execution based on asset management principles. By definition, Air Force real property asset management is a process of accurately accounting for, maintaining, and managing real property in the most efficient and economical manner in accordance with Federal Real Property Council guidance, while ensuring that the Air Force has the real property it needs for sustaining current and projected missions. The program analysis process is developed to systematically analyze real property assets within the district in terms of standard performance elements. Currently, AVCAC has outlined performance measures that combine to generate a prioritized list of requirements across the district. Of course, data is only as good as the effort made to obtain it, and AVCAC know the quality of metrics will vary. Having good data is key to making good decisions, and each installation will have to accept the responsibility to collect and manage performance metrics as part of the asset management responsibilities. The first step in program analysis is called inventory analysis, where we analyze the asset in the district against 3 facility factors: capacity, condition, and configuration. Capacity analysis. This metric compares what you have versus authorized mission requirements. Organized by category code, this performance measure looks at each mission tenant authorized requirements versus assigned occupancy and total capacity within the district. It is used to identify space optimization opportunities or deficits. There should be notes for any findings above or below requirements to help inform the analysis and justify decisions. Condition configuration analysis. These metrics analyze a set of buildings condition or configuration metrics to identify facility with significant deficiencies. A primary metric will be the Building Condition Index, or BCI, from the SMS Builder program. Other data should be used to qualify the BCI. Age of the asset is an easy and accurate metric to collect and should be reviewed against the BCI as a QA check. Risk Assessment Code, or the RAC, or obsolete, missing, RIPI, are examples of configuration deficiencies that are not captured in the builder analysis process. Ultimately, we want to identify facilities with major problems and make issues of them so they are visible and so therefore we can prioritize them. The second step in program analysis is requirement prioritization. This analysis considers the relative importance of facilities to the Air Force mission and the risk to mission created by the facility deficiencies that were identified. Our process follows the Air Force's risk management process to apply a fact-based, risk-informed decision-making in the district planning process and follows a simple algorithm where risk to mission is equal to the probability of failure times the consequence of failure. The primary metric added in this analysis is the Mission Dependency Metric, or MDI, and is used to communicate consequence of failure in the prioritization process. Combining results from capacity, condition, and configuration into a single probability of failure metric will be another simple calculation. The exact terms for the calculation need to be standardized and are expected to mirror aspect of the IPL prioritization process. Prioritization primarily generates a list of all requirements ranked by risk to mission. Before we act on this list, we need a process that allows installation leaders an opportunity to review the list, to make any adjustments in prioritizations, and to select top requirements as objectives for the analysis of alternatives. Only a limited number of objectives should be identified corresponding with realistic expectations for execution, primarily funding limitations. Requirements that fall below the objectives bright line can still be considered in the analysis of alternatives as long as they add value to an alternative and do not make that alternative exceed funding assumptions. The point here is that there will always be more requirements than funds. The prioritization process will focus on highest mission priorities, but will also allow some flexibility to manage and optimize the district's inventory. Again, this is another process that is still under development, and AFCEC intends to work with installations to test this model. In Phase 1, we analyzed the district in terms of installation planning, strategies, and asset management practices to identify the goals and objectives for development. In Phase 2, we develop and analyze alternatives to find the best way to achieve our goals. While we analyze alternatives, we make sure to follow standard practices from NEPA and economic analysis whenever we can. We incorporated these processes because NEPA and FM approvals may be applicable for project approvals later. Following NEPA and FM guidance and then properly documenting the analysis of alternative processes will not only improve our decision making, but also save costs and effort later when it's time for NEPA and FM approvals. AFCEC will continue to work with our NEPA and FM functional experts to help coordinate our process, but here's a current working model. We established a list of prioritized requirements at the end of Phase 1 and formalized that decision with facility board approval. So we already have a very specific, clearly defined scope for the analysis of alternatives. Typical examples of purpose statements and need statements are more general. It is possible that AFCEC may establish a generic purpose statement and need statement to cover all district plans as shown in this slide. Assumptions are constraints, ground rules, criteria, and variables which influence costs and benefits. There are times when assumptions can appropriately narrow the scope of analysis to manageable proportions, but they should not unduly restrict the analysis by eliminating potential significant alternatives. The reasonableness and validity of assumptions, as well as the need for new assumptions, should be periodically reassessed throughout the course of the analysis. Only assumptions that are necessary and reasonable should be included. Assumptions are one way to handle uncertainty, and a sensitivity analysis should be performed to test the effective that major assumptions have on the recommendation. This is a point where the district plan truly shows its value as an effective and efficient planning tool. We have analyzed and identified all the full resources, such as the developable land, as well as opportunities, such as excess facility capabilities within the district, and can now use those resources to craft multiple and achieve new specific planning goals and objectives. This holistic approach provides the maximum opportunity for minimizing costs and environmental impacts while maximizing installation resources and mission support. The basic format of the analysis of alternatives is based on preliminary economic analysis format found in AFMAN 65-506, attachment 14, which is intended as a concise tool for making a recommendation to a decision maker without going through the effort of a full EA. For the analysis of alternatives, identify as a minimum the most obvious alternatives. Categorize the alternatives into two groups: feasible alternatives to be analyzed, such as status quo, renovation, new construction, basic assistance, housing, BAH, or infeasible alternatives to be eliminated, such as leasing. Include reasons for eliminating infeasible alternatives. For costs, identify the major categories of costs and include preliminary estimates by major category. Wash or common costs may be excluded. Ignore minor categories of costs or incidental costs. Round total costs to the nearest $1,000 in keeping with the rough nature of the estimate, and summarize the differences in costs among alternatives as a rough order of magnitude. Discounting would only be necessary if cash flows vary significant in timing. Work to develop cost estimates with the appropriate base level function expert, or your facility maintenance and new facility construction costs from civil engineering, number of dorm occupants by pay grade from base building office. But documentation of cost is not necessary, but check your calculations for accuracy. For the benefits, identify the more important benefits associated with each of the alternatives being analyzed, such as renovation correct of all the deficiencies, or opting for off-base housing for BAH, or reducing facility maintenance and repair workload. For the sensitivity or risk assessment, identify the key variables which, if varied within a reasonable range of analysis, could possibly change the recommendation. For conclusions and recommendation, briefly explain which alternative appears best and why. Emphasize that the choice is based on preliminary analysis only and could be possibly changed based on result of a complete formal EA. Okay, let's take a minute to review. First, let's remember that we have been taking about a process here. The first step in the process was the district analysis, which integrates principles of installation planning and asset management to systematically evaluate the planning district. We use the analysis to identify goals and objectives for that district development and developed a preferred investment program that sustains Air Force mission and manages Air Force resources. Throughout this process, we need to document our work. Project documentation will take several forms like correspondence files, meeting minutes, or reports. Documenting the process is important, especially documenting the analysis of alternatives for follow-on NEPA and economic analysis. For now, we can assume that documentation will be completed by contractors and specified in contract documents. Our model includes a separate phase to emphasize the main outputs from our efforts. There may be many maps, tables, figures on an ADP report, but these three products represents outputs from the district plan process that have an enduring function and must be incorporated in the installation's work processes for future planning, programming, design, and acquisition. The illustrative plan graphically illustrates the preferred direction and development for a district and will clearly show building footprints for projects in the preferred alternative. If necessary, you may need to highlight temporary facilities or interim conditions required to phase execution of the program. The illustrative plan will also show proposed roads, sidewalks, bicycle networks, street trees, open spaces, parking, and parks, all supporting the facilities to be programmed with the primary facilities. Planning only for known requirements is short-sighted and can lead to unforeseen changes since known requirements can change based on changing priorities. The illustrative plan will also show notional building footprints for potential future development. The next product is the execution plan, which is a detailed list of projects and associated planning actions required to complete the preferred alternative. This is a programmatic management tool to execute the plan that we just developed. Typically, projects actions should be organized by the funding program and other criteria typically used in the AFCAMP process, since that is the most effective way to prioritize, track, and manage them. But we also want to include any and all associated actions required to execute the program, not just the ones that require Air Force funding or approvals. The goal here is to complete management tool to successfully manage the development program. The execution plan needs to be consistent with the FCAMP process. New Air Force policy has established new minimum funding requirements for projects to complete for central funding in the FCAMP. Projects less than minimums can be executed by the base with decentralized fund received through the base execution plan. Developing effective funding strategies will be an important part of our analysis of alternatives, and the execution plan will ensure that those strategies are effectively implemented. Remember back on slide 14, we discussed the regulating plan, and it was used in our planning process to guide our analysis of alternatives. So the illustrative plan and executive plan were shaped by and are in compliance with the regulating plan. Here's an important point to emphasize that relates back to many points we made earlier in this lesson. While the illustrative plan and execution plan focus on developing specific facilities for specific requirements, the regulating plan establishes guidelines for all current and future development and is applicable to any current or future planning decision. Illustrative plans and execution plans show what we plan to develop, and we can change over time due to changing missions or investment priorities. The regulating plan shows how to develop and is applied when evaluating alternatives or citing for any new requirement in the district. As such, the regulating plan is the key planning product developed by the district plan and will efficiently inform planning analysis and shape our investment strategies. Now that we introduced you to the district plan process, you will want to start thinking about how to apply it to your own work at your installation. Here are just a few tips to think about to successfully plan and prioritize your work. Stay in touch with new and emerging missions and asset management opportunities to target district plans. It may take a year or more to get funds to execute that plan, but be proactive. Second, review GIS and SMS data long before your kickoff of a district plan. Don't get caught up short after you kick off your plan. You need to consider, how does your installation currently use asset management in their development programs? What information systems are available to provide data to support asset management? And then, is your data accurate enough to support investment decisions? Is GIS accurate and complete for your planning effort? You need to keep all these questions in mind. Next, don't forget to keep your network plans in the mix. New requirements for network plans may result from your district plans. And then lastly, develop a multi-year strategy for building multiple plans. Get them in the line for funding using the AFIMSC X-Plan process. If you need more info, please reach out to your planning POCs at FCAC or AFIMSC to get those details. We said many times that this is only an introduction to the district plan process. Planners should look to the Air Force Planning Workbooks, AFI 32-7062, and the Planning UFCs for more guidance. FCAC is working with AFIT and hopes to update several of the Engineering 519 lessons and the Engineering 520 District Planning Workshop. We know that planning manpower at installations is limited and the district plans will likely require contract support. AVCAC is working to translate the district plan process into standard contract documents to guide our private sector planning professional and deliver consistent planning products across the Air Force. Your input is welcome and encouraged. And then if you have any questions or comments from this lesson, please contact your favorite AVCAC planner. Your success is our mission. If you have any questions, please post them to your course director via email or post your comments in the discussion board online. Thank you.